Local businesses, nonprofits, and law enforcement and government leaders met yesterday to discuss the future of recreational marijuana here in Chautauqua County. The conversation took center stage during a roundtable at the Fredonia Technology Incubator hosted by State Senator George Borrello. Joining us now is Senator Borrello to talk more about what the discussions focused on. Senator, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Justin. Good to be back on with you.
So last night, I know you had a lot of different stakeholders ranging from all sorts of industries here in Chautauqua County come together. Why is it so important to bring them together and hold a conversation on recreational marijuana, which really is becoming quite a big topic as it has been legalized here in New York?
Well, really the impetus for us to do this was the fact that I had many people contact my office with a lot of questions. Unfortunately, there just aren't answers to pretty much any of them. But the real concern for me came about when I started hearing of potential scams that are being perpetrated right now. I had a senior citizen that approached me at an event, and she said that her nephew wants to borrow $20,000 because that's the application fee to open a dispensary, a marijuana dispensary. And, so this is just part of the vacuum that was left by this law that was passed. And then subsequently, no action was taken any further. So we decriminalized recreational marijuana, but the state legislature and the governor failed to put forth any rules, including not seating anyone in the Office of Cannabis Management and the Cannabis Advisory Board, which has left a huge vacuum of leadership and a lot of confusion. So we brought together leaders from across the region to talk about this, business leaders, local elected officials, people that are in law enforcement and public health, so that we could gather as many questions as possible and bring those back so we can be good advocates to ensure that there is a responsible rollout of this.
Yeah, and I know that's one thing we talked about before is that the state is expected to issue more guidance at some point. I don't believe they have yet, and we haven't seen that Office of Cannabis Management come to fruition. For you, who are you going to be directing these questions? I imagine in that public input time, really documenting concerns from folks like the elderly woman who you talked to mayors of towns and villages who maybe are interested in saying, okay, we could have, say, a dispensary here, but what are some of the things that we're going to be able to control in that sense? Who at the state level are you going to be talking to about that?
Well, we're going to address this issue with our new governor, Kathy Hochul, and hopefully she has a better understanding of what is going to be needed as far as leadership on this issue. Our former governor did a horrible job of it, and like most things, he politicized it. We're also going to bring it to the attention of our legislative leaders, because they are also responsible for seating members of the Office of Cannabis Management and the Commission, the Control Board, all these things that have yet to be done. And then we need to move as quickly as possible to start promulgating the many rules that will need to be created in order for us to have an actual marijuana business here in New York State. So right now, as I said, there is a vacuum. That vacuum is being filled by misinformation and con artists that are trying to take advantage. I've been contacted by people in real estate saying, I've got someone who wants to sign a lease, saying they're going to open up a dispensary in this building that I own. This could be a real issue for people. You've got several regulatory hurdles that have to be overcome, and I would hate to see someone get into a situation where they have leased a property, for example, to someone who in the end is never going to get a license, because we really have no idea who will be getting licenses. From a government standpoint, I think it's certainly troubling that they are sticking to this December 31st opt-out deadline for municipalities. Again, it's cities, towns, and villages that can opt out, and after December 31st, they are no longer allowed to opt out. But there's nothing there for them to base this decision on. It seems to me that most communities are going to opt out because of the lack of information. So again, whether you are for the legalization of recreational marijuana or against it, you should be very concerned by how haphazardly state government has handled this so far.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about the black market that is still out there now. I've seen people walking down the street of Jamestown smoking a joint,
Mhm.
and the thing is, well, where'd they buy that from? Well, obviously, where there's a demand, there will be a supply at some point. We've talked to police agencies about that, and sometimes they feel frustrated because there's not much that they can do to, say, prevent smoking something like that at a public park. For you, is it still on that lines of where it should be regulated like alcohol and tobacco?
Yes, and and look at right now, the day that Governor Cuomo signed the law is the day that it was decriminalized. So essentially, we've taken away any real punishment. You'd have to be caught with a tractor trailer load of marijuana, quite literally, in order to face any kind of legal trouble. So for the small possession, 3 ounces or less, for consuming it in public, those are all things that either are no longer illegal or law enforcement has been left with no real guidance. Essentially, there's been a consensus among law enforcement that if you're allowed to smoke a cigarette in a particular public place, then they're not going to bother you for smoking marijuana. Again, this is an irresponsible way of handling it. As I mentioned before, it should be dealt with the same way as alcohol. There should be, for lack of a better term, an open container rule when it comes to the consumption of marijuana. We also have a lot of legal challenges that are going to occur, I believe, because of the burdensome liability that will now be foisted upon people that are operating public spaces, whether it might be a restaurant or a bar or a community center or a public arena. Those folks are going to be responsible, essentially, for the intoxication level of people, and they have absolutely no tools to ensure that people aren't, say, walking into a concert, with a pocket full of THC-laced gummy bears. As of at that moment, that person who has a liquor license that has to be protected, and certainly liability, huge liability, if someone leaves there intoxicated, they have no way of really knowing how intoxicated that person is on things other than what they may have served them. As I've said before, you could serve somebody one beer and they have several THC-laced gummies, go out and get into an accident, and it is the responsibility of that, whether it might be a restaurant or an arena or whatever public space. It's their responsibility, and this is something that has not been addressed in law. I debated this with Liz Kruger, the primary sponsor. She says, well, I don't feel it should be their liability. But unfortunately, that's not going to be the opinion of the trial lawyers across the state that will make it the responsibility of those folks. Again, so many unanswered questions, such an irresponsible rollout. It is going to hinder, in my opinion, not only the responsible a way of handling this, but also the revenues. I mean, we're going to have essentially 2 years of people, emboldening the black market, growing it in their own homes, and then all of a sudden we're going to flip a switch one day saying, okay, now we want you to spend money on legal marijuana. It's just not going to happen. So I think the revenue, go ahead.
Yeah, and to that point of revenue, I think that leads to my next question. A lot of people, including Jamestown, I know Mayor Sundquist has been pretty vocal about this, that he feels the city can take advantage of this new frontier, this new market. But I imagine without the guidance, there's really not much they can do right now except for maybe say, hey, when the time is right, we want to turn these old factories into either a grow operation or something like that. Where do you stand on that issue? And do you feel that it will be as lucrative as former Governor Cuomo and others in the state majority who have been pushing this will be?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Mayor Sundquist for being at the roundtable yesterday. Also, Mayor Rosas from Dunkirk was there as well. Both of them had great contributions. Mayor Sundquist has really done some research on this and is certainly working hard to see if there is a path for a business that could bring some needed economic activity to the city of Jamestown. However, I am not as optimistic as he is, largely because New York State went far beyond any other state when it comes to the looseness of the laws. And you already have seen the black market boom in literally every other state that has legalized recreational marijuana. There's just no way to tell legal marijuana from illegal marijuana. You add to the fact that, according to this law, every single individual 21 and up can have up to 5 pounds of marijuana in their possession legally. They can grow their plants themselves. I just don't see the revenue stream being there. Also, here in Western New York, we have another complication, and that is, the Seneca Nation of Indians has already signaled that they are going to be in the marijuana business, and they will do it without having to pay the hefty state taxes. So how is that going to impact our ability to have profitable operations? Perhaps in the growing and processing end, certainly that's a possibility. But I don't think when it comes to retail sales and dispensaries that the profit is going to be anything significant for any community. Nobody should really be counting on this. This will not be a panacea of revenue. And in fact, when you look at the burdens that were brought up by our public health officials last night, Christine Schuyler from the Chautauqua County Department of Health and others that were in attendance, the costs to our communities, to the taxpayers, to manage these situations has been proven out in other states to be very costly, and will likely be far beyond whatever revenues will be generated at the local level especially.
All right. State Senator George Borrello, thank you for your time today. If there are folks out there in the community who are watching this and they want to take part in the conversation, what's the best way to do that with you?
Well, and I think going forward, we're going to have more. Right now, we're in an information gathering part of this. We gathered questions last night from community leaders. We talked about everything from public safety to banking, and we're going to bring those questions, those unanswered questions, back to the state legislature. So I would encourage folks to certainly reach out if you have questions. If you've been contacted by someone, and let me be clear, there is literally nothing in place yet. There is no dispensary application. There are no rules that have been promulgated. So if someone has contacted you saying that they are going to be in the marijuana business, they are not telling the truth. So please be cautious. There's a lot of con artists out there, and this is just another opportunity for people to be scammed.